TCU has a new safeties coach in Tre Watson, and Andy Avalos continues to build this defense in his image.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for 12 years. We are brought to you today by FanDuel. Super Bowl matchup is here. Chiefs Eagles. We'll tell you later on in the show how you can get in on the action this Super Bowl Sunday in a couple weeks with FanDuel. But we start today with some breaking news that came down on Sunday. TCU has hired Tre Watson from Cal. He was the DB's coach at Cal for a number of seasons and coached there under Justin Wilcox. He is now the safeties coach at TCU. He is also the passing game coordinator. So got that title as well. And that's the same exact title that Paul Gonzalez got when he left and went down the road to Baylor a couple weeks ago. So Paul Gonzalez moving on to coach with Dave Aranda as a passing game coordinator on the defensive side of the ball. And now TCU replaces him by bringing in Tre Watson from Cal. A few notes on Tre, and then I want to get to a larger point. But this seems like a really good hire. One thing about Tre Watson, he's very young. He's 33 years old. In 2020, he was named in 247's 30 under 30 list, just coaches that were making a huge impact and were names to watch that were under 30 years old in the profession. He's been coaching with Justin Wilcox for 4 seasons. He's one of the more respected defensive minds in the country. He runs, a 4-2-5 type of hybrid scheme. And hybrid at this point, when we're talking about defense, is kind of redundant. Everybody's running, for the most part, a sort of unique, like you have safeties and linebackers that are hybrid players that can come down the box but can also play in coverage. One thing that they were known for at Cal while Watson was there was taking the ball away. In 2023, they forced 28 turnovers total. They had 12 interceptions. And I think to a certain extent, forcing turnovers is about the players. Like you have to have players who are instinctual, who understand how to read a quarterback's eyes, how to jump routes, and also the idea of just the mentality like, I'm going to take the ball away. I'm not just looking to break up a pass or make it a completion. Like I'm here to force the issue, get a pick, force a fumble. And that comes down to like the players, who they are, how they see themselves as an opportunistic defense. But I do remember a few years ago when I was still in the radio industry, we had Joey McGuire on one time, and it was while he was at Baylor. And Joey kind of bounced around. Like he came to Baylor as a tight ends coach, and they moved him over to the defense side of the ball. And the year that Baylor went to the Big 12 championship game under Matt Rule, they ended up losing to Oklahoma in that game, but they made it there. Joey was named the head coach of turnovers, or his title. I don't remember the exact title of the game, but basically it was like, we want you to be the guy that gets this defense to a place where they have the mentality of we're taking the ball away. And their motto was take 3. And so they were trying to get 3 turnovers a ball game. And they did that to a large extent. And so there is a coaching aspect of, yes, you need players that can go make plays, that can force the issue and force turnovers. But I do feel like there's an aggressiveness that the TCU defense is really missing under Joe Gillespie, and that they're hoping to gain with Andy Avalos. But if you think about it, I mean, the last couple of seasons, with all the issues the defense has had, and yes, you still have to play fundamentally sound football. You need to be able to stop the run. You need to be able to have guys that can cover. But if the TCU defense over the last few years, then we're talking about a very different team, because that was a huge issue through the first half of the season. They were giving the ball away, and they weren't forcing those turnovers on defense. And 2 years ago, same thing. I mean, giving up a lot of yards, giving up a lot of big plays, but also not being able to turn a team over, flip field position, get those big momentum-changing plays that we'd love to see. And I talked a lot through really all of the last year about playing complementary football, how important that is, how much that can change things. And that's huge on defense. It's big on special teams. Your offense also has something to do with it. And now with the changes that have happened with the clock and the helmet communication, we're seeing teams huddle more. We saw TCU change up that a little bit and say, you know what, we're not going to run at this breakneck pace all the time. We're going to slow things down and get these calls in and really assess what we want to do. So if that can all come full circle and you can add the element of forcing turnovers, then that's a huge thing. Tre Watson, also known as a really good recruiter, he's going to come in. He'll get to work with a safety group that is very experienced. I mean, Bud Clark is coming back for what feels like year 10. But in all seriousness, I mean, Bud's been around for a while and he's been a great player. Jamel Johnson was in the portal. He's coming back, and he started every game last season. A couple young guys, Devin Harago, Caden McFadden, Jordan Lester. Now these guys get sort of a clean slate, and they get to approach this with a new coach and say, hey, what does my career look like with a different position coach, and hopefully impress him and make some waves once the offseason program picks up. The offseason program's already here, but once he gets here and then into spring camp and into fall camp. But this seems like a really good hire. Tre was with Andy Avalos very briefly. He was with him for one season in Oregon, and he was a GA. So they have some familiarity, but this is not like a, hey, I know this dude super well. I'm bringing in my friend or my former coworker that I've worked with through the years. I think he came in and really impressed everybody during the interview process, because I can't imagine, even if he was really impressive as a GA at Oregon, that one season being the real difference maker here. So Tre Watson, new DBs coach, new safeties coach, also your passing game coordinator. TCU lands him, young guy. And this is a young defensive staff now. I mean, Tre Watson, Juice Brown, your corners coach, Jamarcus McFarland, your D-line coach. Ken Wilson has been around a little bit longer, but has really good experience. Former head coach at Nevada. He's your linebackers guy. And then Avalos commanding this whole thing. One thing that this really speaks to, though, as well, with him coming on board, when Andy took this job, he wasn't like, I guess he wasn't forced to do this, but Sonny strongly encouraged him. It was like, hey, this kind of happened late in the process. We want to keep some continuity here. So he was told in a lot of ways who his position coaches were going to be. Jamarcus McFarland stayed on, and he's still here. Carlton Buckle stayed on. He moved on. He left right before the season started. And now I saw this weekend, he's headed to La Tech to take over that job. So whatever was going on there, it's gotten worked out, and now he's taking a job elsewhere. But you bring on Juice Brown, who came over from Washington and was supposed to be an analyst, but thankfully he was on staff and could step in at the last minute when they needed somebody to take over that role as a position coach. You had Tre Watson, who doesn't have like an extensive history with Andy Avalos, but Andy got to handpick him as the guy who was going to be in charge of the safeties, and now your passing game coordinator. And Ken Wilson comes over as your linebackers coach. We've seen over the last two recruiting cycles and in the portal, they've made a huge emphasis to go get pass rushers. They've gotten a few DBs that fit what they want to do. They went really heavy in the safety and corner position last offseason in the portal and had some mixed results there. I mean, some of those guys are contributors. Some of them didn't wash out necessarily, but they moved on elsewhere. But Andy is now at a place where this defense is set up how he wants it. You're not completely there personnel-wise, but you're gaining traction in that regard. I mean, we've seen with this 2026 class, it's been all defensive linemen so far, with the exception of one wide receiver. And in the similar vein to what they were doing in 2025, it's a lot of guys that can get after the pass rusher or get after the passer as a pass rusher, be disruptive, make havoc happen in the backfield. So for Sonny, I wonder this, because he's never really been known for great defenses, obviously. And I think part of that is in just an investment situation. Like, he hasn't fully invested in the resources, and having a big name defensive coordinator who has like a great reputation across football. He did that by hiring Andy Avalos. And I don't know what Andy's aspirations are. I mean, you kind of assume all these guys want to be a head coach. He already did that. He was the head coach at Boise, and that didn't work out. He got let go, or they parted ways with him. And so he ended up here. I'm sure eventually if he's doing a good job, which is what you hope that there's going to be you don't hope there's going to be interest in him in that regard. But if he's doing a good job, inevitably, there'll be either big name schools that say, hey, we want you to be the DC, or there will be more head coaching opportunities. His name was briefly floated in the UNLV vacancy this past offseason, earlier this offseason, but nothing really happened there. For Avalos, though, how attractive is it if Sonny and the powers that be say, hey, you can be the head coach of the defense here? Like, Gary kind of tried to do this with the offense through the years, but I think at the end of the day, he still sort of made his way back around to having some input, or having more input than the offensive coaches would have liked at times. But Sonny is notoriously, and some people kind of cringe at this and don't love it, but he is more of a CEO head coach. What I mean by that is, like, he's not calling plays on offense. He's not that involved in the defense. He's trying to hire people that do a good job, allow them to do a good job, and he's looking at a lot of big picture stuff. How are we preparing? What are we doing? What's the direction of the program? All those things. So if he allows Andy to really just let loose with this defense and says, hey, this is your thing, I'm not going to meddle in it, and if you do a good job, like, I don't see a need to be that involved, and you have the freedom to hire the coaches you want, to go recruit the type of players you want, we'll support you in that. We'll try to put the best talent on the field that you see fit to make plays, make things happen in Big 12. That seems like a really good deal. I mean, it feels like, for a defensive coach who's kind of been around and has done the head coaching thing, and it didn't go super well. Now, I mean, there's a laundry list of coaches who first head coaching stint didn't work out, but they learned some things. Second go around, it was much better. I just think if you can really sell him on the idea of, hey, this is your side of football, and we're not going to get involved with it. Like, obviously, there's some checks and balances here, but this is your thing. And if they can build this the right way and set him up for success, then TCU can make it very difficult for him to look around and see better opportunities than what he has in front of him. Tre Watson, new defensive backs coach, new safeties coach for TCU, also passing game coordinator. When we come back, hoops over the weekend. The TCU women, big-time bounce-back win. The men, well, not so much. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. First, though, a quick message from our friends at TurboTax. It's that time of year. It's tax season. This message is brought to you from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while getting you real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. And you'll get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. That's Taxes. Get an expert on TurboTax.com. This is only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time update in their mobile app. TurboTax, check it out today. Get your taxes done. Get the most money possible from their tax experts. Okay, TCU Hoops recap over the weekend, and we'll start with the good news. TCU women, tough loss to Oklahoma State on Wednesday night. Had a big lead, and this has been a trend with them. I'm not sure if it's I'll give my opinion on it here in a second. I think part of it's the short rotation. I also think part of it is the offensive system to a certain degree. But they've had issues closing games. Now, I say that, I mean, the Oklahoma State game was their first loss in conference play. But if you followed this team, there's been a number of games where they've jumped out to double-digit lead, in some cases a 20-plus point lead. And then slowly things get whittled down. It happened on the road in Stillwater, and they couldn't hold on. Now, Haley Van Lith had a jumper basically at the buzzer that would have won it, but it went off the rim. They lost 60-59, suffering their first Big 12 loss of the season. Now, Kansas State, who was also undefeated in Big 12 play. And it appears they're the team that is the biggest threat to TCU when it comes to winning a conference title or playing for conference title. They fell to Colorado on Saturday, so they took their first conference loss of the season as well. TCU hosted Baylor on Sunday afternoon. They won 80-75. This is the first win over Baylor women's hoops since 1990. I was born in 1992. So it hasn't happened in my lifetime. Now, that win in 1990 was when they were in the Southwest Conference. There was a long gap in between matchups, right? But still, 37 straight games Baylor women's hoops had won over TCU. And this Baylor team under Nikki Collin, they are 16-5 overall, 6-2 in conference play. They are not. This is not the Kim Mulkey era. They're not as dominant, but this was a team that was in the Sweet 16 last year. They're still really good. And bottom line is, like, even with Oklahoma's moved on to the SEC, but they won the Big 12 last season. You know, Iowa State's been good. Kansas State's been good. In my mind, when I think of Big 12 women's basketball, I still think of Baylor as the standard. So this is a big win. Like, I think just mentally getting over that hurdle, big deal. Even though these players, and it's not like they were in the midst of this losing streak, it's still significant to get this victory. And the game script kind of played out in a similar way. Got out to a 22-point lead. Slowly that got whittled down. Baylor went to a press in the second half, and they were really physical with TCU. And there was some officiating that was questionable that I didn't love. But TCU also made some careless mistakes with the basketball. And they just struggled to score late in ball games. And I think part of that might be fatigue. As I said earlier, they have a short bench. But I also, you know, Sedona Prince is a really great post player. And she had another big night, 24 points, 11 of 18 from the field. I would like to see them get her the ball more late in games. Because right now they're running a lot of, I mean, it's a motion offense, which means they don't really have Melissa Tre Watson wrote a really good piece about the women's basketball team a few weeks ago. They don't really have, like, sets per se. It's, you know, it's all like, if somebody does this, then we do this. And it's moving around, and it's spread pick and roll, and it's, you know, trying to create the best one-on-one matchups for your scores. But late in games, I mean, you're getting a lot of jump shots. And I know that's what they want to do. I mean, Haley Van Lith, shooter, scorer. Madison Connor, great shooter. I just think late in these ball games, you need to get something around the rim more often. And that could be really beneficial for this team. Also, though, Van Lith, I don't know if she was just had dead legs yesterday. I mean, she missed a layup, like a wide open layup late in the ball game. You know, she was short on a few jumpers, which you kind of expect in that part of the ball game. But they just got to find a way to get easier buckets in the third and fourth quarter, because it feels like things get really tight late in these games for them. However, they hit some free throws. They got some key stops. They held on. They got a victory. And they continue to play at a high level. Really impressed with what Mark Campbell has done. And that was a big bounce back. I mean, you lose a game like that against Oklahoma State, and not like things are going to go into a tailspin, but it would be pretty easy to come back on a Sunday afternoon at home and not play your best basketball. But they answered the call against a good Baylor team. They play Iowa State on Sunday and then Kansas State on Wednesday. So 2 more big games. That Kansas State game, we'll see if they drop. I don't know if they might drop out of the top 10. TCU might drop out of the top 10 with this loss to Oklahoma State, but it should be at least a top 15 matchup. And that'll be a big one. It'll also be very instrumental in who wins the Big 12 title. So watch for that this next week. But first off, playing Iowa State in a big-time matchup, and got a little bit of a break. So hopefully that's good for this team. Get a week off, essentially, sort of rest, recuperate, get your legs back under you before you hit the second half of the conference season. TCU men, when you go 1 from 20 from 3, when you shoot 5% from beyond the arc, that's typically not a great recipe for success. They get blown out by UCF 85-58. They're now 3-5 in conference play. They played Texas Tech on Wednesday night in Lubbock. Just a rough game from the beginning. I mean, they got down 9-0 early, turning the ball over, gave up some threes, and I mean, they were never really in this ball game. There was a stretch in the middle of the first half where they cut it to 6 a couple times. And it looked like, okay, maybe they're going to get back in this, but never really got any traction there. Vashawn Alette led the team in scoring, but nobody had a good day. I mean, he had 15 points. He was 5 of 15 from the field. Noah Reynolds had 8 points. My biggest concern with this team, and I've said it a few times this year, we kind of knew what the deal was going into it. This was somewhat of a rebuilding year. You've got a lot of new faces, but you've got a lot of new faces from the portal, like experienced players. And your young guys who you're excited about aren't playing. I mean, RJ Jones is redshirting. So was Ashton Simmons. Micah Robinson, I like what I've seen from him at times, but he's not getting consistent minutes. He only had 2 points on Saturday. I like David Punch. I think David can turn into a great player. He's very limited offensively now. He did have 2 big dunks in traffic against UCF. But that's the extent of his offensive game at the moment, which, I mean, he's a young, big guy. That's kind of, par for the course in some ways. I'm just, I've likened this season to Mike Miles' freshman year. And during Mike's freshman year, you could see, okay, this guy's a dude. I mean, RJ Nembhard took a lot of the shots that season, but you could see, okay, this guy can play. And there are a few other guys on that team that you're like, all right, I see the potential here. But I don't see that right now. I mean, they had the nice win against Baylor. That was cool. But you immediately come back and things get away from you in the second half against Kansas, and then you just get blown out against UCF. Not a lot of positivity around this program right now. We'll see what they can do against Texas Tech this weekend. When we come back, we'll get some of your reactions from Friday's show. Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Super Bowl 59 is set. Are you excited for Eagles-Chiefs? Man, I got to be honest, guys. I have Chiefs fatigue. I also hate seeing the Eagles in there as a Cowboys fan. But bottom line is Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. Live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Check out FanDuel. Do it today. One quick note. It's sad, but it's also like a really cool thing for Jack Besh and his family. So if you missed it, Jack Besh's brother, Tiger Besh, who was a wide receiver at Princeton. He was tragically one of the victims of the terrorist attack in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. And that was just horrible, is horrible for the Besh family. I know they're still grieving. Our thoughts and prayers go out to them. But Jack has been very vocal on social media about just honoring his brother and how much he loves him and continuing his legacy. I saw that at the Senior Bowl, every player will have a little patch on the back of their helmet, the number 7, or a helmet sticker, I should say, is number 7. It's in Princeton kind of logo, and it's in honor of Tiger Besh, who I saw Jack share that he was a hero. I mean, he shoved some people out of the way that were standing near him, and basically sacrificed his life for some women there that he had been talking with that night. So just, I mean, a tragic situation, obviously, but really cool that he's going to get honored in that way. And hopefully for Jack, that's just a gratifying moment for him to see his brother get remembered in that way at the Senior Bowl. And for him and Savion Williams and others, a great chance to improve their draft stock, but not really the point here, obviously. I was just trying to pass along the idea that that's awesome that the Senior Bowl leadership is doing that for the Besh family and to honor Tiger Besh specifically. No easy transition from that into something else. But on Friday, we talked about the season opener for TCU football, which is going to be against North Carolina and Bill Belichick. And, it should be fun, man. It's going to be a standalone game on Labor Day on September 1st. Jacob Langford says we will go to Chapel Hill and make Bill wish he stayed in the NFL. I hope so, man. I hope so. I think this is going to be a good opportunity for TCU to go make a statement. And that's great to see. The Belichick thing is super interesting. I mean, I know it's not the point of this podcast, but, man, I'm just very intrigued by that whole situation, him coaching in college football, what that's going to look like. And I know, like, him and Deion are very different, but I guess I make that comparison because TCU also was involved in Deion's debut. You know, Deion's calling card was bringing in that talent, and Bill is more of like he knows how to evaluate talent, but he's always been more of a guy who knows how to give you an edge in scheme and matchups. And so what does that look like at the college football level? That'll be really interesting to see. Steven, not me, Steven, but another Steven says, schedule is brutal for 2025, but I have faith. Got to get off to a good start against UNC. Yeah, it does look tough. I mean, it looks really tough. You're playing a lot of good teams. You're not really missing any of the power brokers in the Big 12. You're getting everybody. So they got to be ready to play. Richard Berry said the schedule looked tough in 2024 until it wasn't. Not saying we'll go undefeated, but if we find a running game and find some wheels for Hoover, who knows what can happen. That game against UNC is crucial for TCU's national reputation. Yes, I think it is too. As I said, it's really going to be the first time they've been in the national spotlight since that Colorado game a few years back. And, yeah, I mean, it's predicting a schedule and how tough it's going to be is always a fool's errand because you're right. We said in 2024, man, that's going to be a tough schedule and ended up being really manageable. So we don't know. But on paper, it looks difficult. Bottom line is, though, you want to get off to a good start regardless, and they can do that when they play North Carolina on that Monday night, on Monday Night Football. Good opportunity for Josh Hoover to make some waves and get his name more in the national conversation. We talk about great players and great quarterbacks for 2025. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to that YouTube channel.